PowerPoint maneuvers. I gave you guys some homework after the last time we were together, and I said, I want you to give some thought to what are your personal PowerPoint maneuvers. And I said that there's two different kinds of PowerPoint maneuvers I want you to come up with for yourselves, and that was PowerPoint maneuvers that are more externally oriented. So you go and do something, but you also need to have some internal ones, some things you can do in the quietness of your own mind to recenter yourself. So I'm just curious to hear anything you guys would like to share about either external, internal, or a sample of both of your personal PowerPoint maneuvers. So anyone give it some thought? They all rush to unmute their microphones. Okay, well then.
Well, I'll go. I'll go.
You.
I have a tendency to think about my kids when I want to center myself.
All right, and so this is something that's more of a what type would you say, external or internal?
It's internal.
Yeah, internal, because you're doing it just in your own head.
Yeah.
And because of that, you can do it anywhere at any time.
Yep.
And that's very important when you've got, I don't know, you're feeling off balance. You'll want to get back into that centered spot, but the timing or the circumstances don't allow you to go doing one of the physical things that you might otherwise have chosen to do. And so, David, what are some of your external ones? If you were going to do something in motion, what centers you?
Did you ask me, T?
Yeah, I'm asking you at the moment.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm working out.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, we just left the gym. And as much as I don't think either one of us felt like we had sufficient energy to actually go, we both went. And our trainer ignored our pleas for being gentle with us. And okay, that was great. No, it's fine. So yeah, that's absolutely a PowerPoint maneuver. So Brian, you've unmuted. What are they for you?
Yeah, mine, I tend to go internal. So, I always carry around journals with me. And so, I can write immediately. And it often serves as a way of like reflecting a mirror, like something triggered me, but I'm not like looking as to why they did it. I'm looking at why it triggered me. So, it draws me back inward, and that's what the journaling does. So that's one of my go-tos. I never go anywhere without a journal.
Yeah. Now, would you say the journaling is internal or external?
I think it serves both because the writing becomes cathartic itself, but I'm going internal in that, that was my way of grasping language in general, particularly English, because it's just me and the paper, and I don't have to worry about if there's grammatical errors and all that because it's not open for anyone.
Right. And so obviously the thought part of it is internal. The moment you start with pen to paper, you're now doing something external. But I'm glad you brought that up, because I think there's also a difference between an intentional and an incidental sort of PowerPoint maneuver. So like, for example, when you decide to go for a bike ride, you're not really maybe intending for it to be a PowerPoint maneuver, but it kind of inherently is.
Yeah. I lose track of time, everything, especially like if I'm riding in like the Rock Creek Park or something like that, very scenic, very beautiful around the Potomac. I'll just lose track of time. Next thing you know, I look up and I'm 26 miles in. I'm like, whoa, okay.
I try not to drive 26 miles. Amazing. Yeah, but again, I think sometimes that external activity moves us to the center, even though we didn't intend to have it as a deliberate, conscious kind of an activity. And to me, that speaks of something that the mind takes care of on its own. So I'll just throw that out there and let you guys see if you can come up with what I'm thinking about. So what do you think? I mean by sometimes the PowerPoint maneuver happens and it's not an intentional conscious choice on your part.
So it's like a natural move
Natural move. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Natural
back
move.
going back inward, like the homeostasis, the body is set up for that, right?
Right. So
So
why would the body do that? Why do you guys think the body would decide to turn something into a PowerPoint maneuver that was not intended to be one? Why would the body, why would the mind do that?
Because it
I think
needs it.
There you go.
exactly.
Right.
Yeah,
So your body knows what your body needs, and
absolutely.
it'll try to do that. And, sometimes a PowerPoint maneuver can also be like doing a quick nap or a little bit of meditation or whatever. So sometimes I've wondered if daydreaming is its own form of a PowerPoint maneuver, where your brain has just decided you need to separate, you need to take a little vacation here, ponder something for a while, and we'll see how that does. So,
That's a good point, because a lot of times we give those things like, a bad rap and say, a person is distracted. But as you were just pointing out, the body has a lot of smart design. I seen cases where I was going through my emergency room rotation where people came in through a motor vehicle accident. They fell asleep at the wheel, although they knew they were tired. The body is smart enough to shut itself down. And
Right.
that's exactly what happened to them.
Yep, you can only defeat it for so long, and then your body's going to do what your body needs to do. And so, it kind of makes you wonder what else your body does to move you to a centered place of its own accord. And yeah, I do think it goes back to smart design. If your body knows that occasionally it needs its own reset, then certainly you should be able to consciously move into reset mode whenever you become aware of it being there. Those of you, I don't know if you're looking at your chat window, but Chris has also shared. Chris, do feel free to unmute if you're in a place where you'd like to just share openly with us. But breathing, it's an internal thing. I use it to calm down, as well as when I need to create a higher energy before presentation. That goes back to Circle of Brilliance series we did well over a year ago now, about what happens to breathing patterns as you find yourself at different sections of the change grid. So sometimes we may consciously decide to breathe in a way that would lower our tension, calm us down. But if you're about to step up on stage, you need to do one of those shake awake things. So get more oxygen, move into your brain and all that. And so you start doing a little bit more deliberate, quicker, deeper, or quicker, more shallow breaths, just to kind of, I don't know quite to say it, but, priming the pump, if you will, or putting it up there. Yeah. So, Chris, you've unmuted. Yeah, go ahead and share that with us.
Yeah, well, you said it perfectly. T, I learned that from Tony Robbins about taking those quick, short breaths to increase your energy. And then when I feel stressed coming on, or if something impactful happened, I tend to just get still, slow my breathing down. I listened, Kathy said something a year ago, a couple of years ago about that, and it never left my mind. So when like a traumatic situation or just something really big happens where it demands a hitting the pause button in life, so to speak, just to get still and then just monitor my breathing, taking those long breaths, center myself before I make any type of decision, and giving myself that permission not to need to make a decision in that moment. Just get calm, get present, and make a decision after I'm in a better space or place.
That's a good point. And Kathy
so,
talks a lot about that somatic part of that, because when you talk about breathing, for the most part, it's controlled by the autonomous nervous system. So it's unconscious for a lot of people until we take, some kind of intentional control over it. Especially in a sympathetic situation where, there's trauma or there's some heightened sensibility there, and we're breathing fast, and we just think, oh yeah, okay, let's just go with it. But if you don't understand that, okay, you can regulate that, right, by some of that stuff that Chris is talking about somatically, then you just become hijacked. And I'm wondering how much of this is like, in today's time, it seems like attention itself is a capital asset that's not invested a lot in.
Mm.
It's like distraction is the rule, right? Multitasking and all these kinds of things under the guise of being productive.
Right. So Chris, while you're unmuted, do you have an external PowerPoint maneuver that also works for you? Something you actually go out and do to center yourself?
I would say golf.
Oh, all right. Yes.
And it goes back to some of your teachings, T, because it gives me something that has sufficient challenge. And certainly I'm not a master at it. So it allows me to really put my attention somewhere else. Right. So my attention could be, and I'm not playing, I forgot how it went, but I'm not in competition with the people I'm playing golf with. It's me against the course.
Right.
So all challenge is coming from me focused on the disciplines that I need to do to hit the best possible shots and not focused on anybody else. It's really just me and the course. So it takes my mind away, that brief vacation from everything that's going on. And it allows me to really just be in a better place and space to enjoy the outdoors, enjoy the trees, enjoy the sounds, and enjoy the moment.
Yeah, that's very good.
I think this calls for a golf outing. The first team out to make your golf outing.
Yes, I'll drive the golf cart for everyone. In fact, over the weekend, I was talking with Stephen's father. Many of you may have met Tony over the years, but Tony's an avid golfer. And I was, at some point in time, we were talking about something, and I said, well, I don't know where I learned this from, but I learned that success in life is not a game of football, because it's not your team wins and the other team loses. And it's not a tennis match where I win and you lose. A success in life is a game of golf where it's just you against par. And you're the one who sets whatever that par happens to be, as far as your life goals happen to be. So we need to stop looking at our lives, success in our life, as being something where in order for us to win, others must lose. So he was talking about playing golf with some of his friends together. And I said, you're really not playing golf together. You're just playing golf at the same time.
Right.
And
Right.
there's you want to place a little wager. Well, now you've turned it into a very different game than what it is. But ultimately, it's just you against par. I think it's because somehow or another, Tony's always getting pulled into becoming an officer of one group or another. And he got pulled into his golf club's I'm not a golfer, so I don't know all the lingo, you guys will, but he said that in order for you to have an accurate handicap number, there's certain things that you as a golfer must do to meet whatever the national or international guidelines are around that. And Tony's the guy who has to police people reporting their scores and all this kind of stuff. To do that. What's that? David, what did you say?
I said, oh, wow.
Oh, yeah. I mean, who knew that where a handicap comes from? So we had this big discussion about.
Well, I actually have had a handicap before. And here in Michigan, it's called GAM, the Golf Association of Michigan. And it is pretty strict.
Yeah, right. Because he says you're supposed to, by the rules, you're supposed to post your score for your game by the end of that day.
Yep.
And he has to chase people down and say, look, if you don't follow these guidelines, then we can suspend your handicap rating altogether. Or what he wants to do, we'll suddenly pull this back into tension management. You will all appreciate this. I don't know what the perfect score is in golf. I guess it might be different from one course to the next, but par is how many? What would be a perfect score in golf? So
that'd be a perfect score. Par would be perfect.
Okay, but give me a number. What number is that?
72.
72?
Yep.
Okay, and so he said that anyone who fails to do that in a given time period should simply be given a report automatically, a score that automatically penalizes them. So actually increases there. And so I think he was talking about, we're going to give you, okay, penalizing would be giving you a lower handicap than is actually your level of skill.
That's
right?
correct.
And so you would have to then be given an exceptionally good game in order to lower your handicap. So I think he was talking about shaving 10 points off what the course's par would be. So you come in at 10 under par, is that going to affect your handicap next time around?
Mm.
I don't know. I don't know how the math all works, but I
Yeah,
thought,
T,
yeah.
what he was saying was anyone that fails to put in their score automatically is given par.
Yeah, but par is not a penalty.
Yeah, no, actually it is. That's a scratch golfer, and that would be a 0 handicap.
Oh, okay. So even that, yeah. Right. Interesting.
AT,
Yes.
quick question. Can we go back? Hey, Brian said a quote, and I got to get that quote. It's bugging me. So unanswered questions are killing me right now in my
Okay,
head.
good.
So Brian, you said something about attention is a capital investment, underused, or something like that. And I just thought it was so powerful.
Yeah,
I need to
said
get
that. Yeah, I talk about this a lot in the patients that have been researching, and it seems like they're really distracted. So, we came up with this idea that we were talking to a group of them that attention is our greatest capital asset that anyone can choose to invest in. And I was comparing it to, because this was a group of financial people. So we take great lengths to protect your money. You have all these different kinds of codes and rules around it. But when I was talking to this group, no one does the same thing when it comes to their attention.
Mhm.
So to me, it said that, okay, for me, at least that's what I gathered, that attention is our greatest capital asset. So being selective with it, what we allow in, what is becomes important. And that's an important part of attention management.
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
Mhm.
And actually, that goes back
Thank you.
to, was it Paul Allen, Peter, who wrote As a Man Thinketh?
Yeah, Edgar Allan.
Somebody Allen?
Was it Joseph Murphy?
I
No,
think it was
Tim
Edgar.
Allen.
Oh, somebody Google it real
I
quick.
think it's Edgar Allan.
Well, that's Edgar Allan Poe. He wrote,
Oh.
yeah, he wrote
It's William Allen. I think.
William Allen.
Yeah,
There
yeah,
you
yeah,
go.
yeah. I do remember the Allen part. But As a Man Thinketh, so you kind of wonder, is thinking attention? Because Allen's work would say that whatever you tend to focus on is far more likely to manifest itself in your reality. And so if you focus on being kind, you're likely to become more kind. And if you focus on being very financially successful, you're more likely to do that. So is focus and attention, or is think a thing, the same thing as putting attention on something? So what do you think about that? Oh, good joke, Shag. Shag says, if the object of golf is to get around the course in as few strokes as possible, why do it at all? I love it. That's very good. Yeah. All right.
Yeah,
So
just head for the clubhouse.
exactly right. Exactly right.
Called
Okay,
the
yeah.
19th hole.
Yeah, there you go. So all right. So back to the question though. It's like that whole idea, and I forget what year As a Man Thinketh was written, probably back in the 30s or 40s or something.
Oh yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know that it's really just that simple, because we're having thoughts all the time. We're not necessarily conscious of all of them all at once, right?
Right.
So when we're talking about the difference between thoughts, the difference between feelings, and there's always been this debate, which one comes first, which one enhances the other. There are different processing systems. So the way that they process information is going to be uniquely different. And just from my own experience, I tend to think the mind is always catching up to where the body has already been. So a lot of times what I learned, if you just entertain any thought that come into your mind without filtering it, in terms of its relevancy, in terms of application, you can be in a heap of trouble.
Mhm.
So I
Yeah.
don't think that we just, these thoughts they're always going. But what we do know when we do like brain scans, when people become very interested in something, alert, and has an intensity to it, those are the thoughts that tend to capture your attention. That's why I said in the journal, I want to see, well, why am I triggered by this person being an idiot? They're probably always an idiot.
Yeah,
But why
right,
am I
exactly.
triggered by it?
Yeah, because of some complex equivalence you've allowed to exist in your mind.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's resonating with something is what I tend to try to get at. What is it resonating with in me that allowed me to be triggered?
That's
Because
very
without that understanding, then the same thing can happen in a different situation, and same thing can happen in the most inopportune time. And here it is, I'm known as this Mr. Positive guy, but I get triggered by this person being an idiot, and that's probably just how they are, who they know to be.
right. And so the person who needs to change in this regard is you.
Right,
So
exactly.
I had a friend for years that drove everybody else crazy, and for whatever reason, I found him amusing. So that's always was that they would say, he did this, he did blah blah blah. I stay with him as a friend because I find it all very amusing to observe. So anyway, it's James Allen, 1903. It was and it was considered to be one of the very first self-help books outside of a religious kind of domain. Obviously, the Bible and other religious works existed, and those were considered to be self-help books by some, as many as well. But he was considered one of the first self-help things. Yeah.
But T, everything we're talking about, thought, intention, I mean, everything, the laws of attraction and manifestation, and even biblical verses, they all support that. I don't think that's anything.
No,
it's not. I mean, science proves it, and religion proves it. It's just there. It's true.
yeah.
But the other thing I was going to say when you were talking about golf, I don't think that's any different than fishing or me shopping for a good deal at Goodwill. Do you remember the book by Ram Dass, Be Here Now? When you are in that ever precious, and that's why even murderers like the Tate murders, Charlie Manson and so forth, there is something about being in the ever precious present, whether it's catching the fish or on the golf course, that you are so detached, zone, whatever you want to call it, flow. Yeah. But it's the same across the board, that you are in that center spot. There's no, I don't think there's any question about it.
Isn't that interesting? So for whatever reason, any sort of behavior could actually end up being a centering experience for an individual. Yeah, so I know a lot of times when people are talking or thinking about the center of the change grid, it seems to be this hallowed spot where all of the greatest goodness in the universe resides, or the universe of the individual resides. But we don't know what that universe of the individual actually contains. So if it contains, well, I mean, again, talking about serial killers and all that, you got to believe there's something else pathological going on.
Well, yeah. But there is something. I've talked to some of my clients that, like that teacher that robbed, and there was something about just the power of being in the moment, that and that's why it's addictive. It's such a peaceful place. I mean, I'm addicted to good bargains. My brain lights up. People are addicted to golf. Their families are wrecked because of it. And I think that's where the addiction comes in, because it's a Zen state, really.
Yeah, well, that interesting.
I mean, I was just going to comment on that. I mean, I think there are many ways that I get to that place. And I mean, when I was younger, before my back was really bad, I would love going on, on roller coasters. And really as fast as possible, or in fast cars. And so a lot of motion. I mean, extreme speed can do it. Used to do it for me. It doesn't anymore, but it used to do it for me. But you can get at that in that way. It's like whatever you can lose yourself in.
Right.
It's different than being that totally detached, meditative state. But if you want to lose yourself and just be in the moment, you can do it a lot of different ways.
Do you remember Ram Dass, Kathy? I think we're the only ones old.
Oh no, Ram Dass, I remember.
Oh yeah, of course.
Okay. Yeah, he was pretty big back then.
Yeah.
Tim has just joined our call. And so Tim, you've got no idea what we've been talking about. So I'm going to put you on the spot. So hopefully you can unmute yourself. Don't jump off the call. So we were talking about people's PowerPoint maneuvers, things they do to center themselves. And people have been talking about all sorts of things, from breathing to meditating to going for bike rides, etc. And I'm wondering if something I know about you is a PowerPoint maneuver for you. So those of you who don't know, Tim is quite the jewelry maker. And when you see the things that he's produced, they're objects of great beauty, but I wonder if creating one is a Zen experience. So Tim, are you in a place where you can unmute yourself or?
Yes, yes,
Oh,
I
there
am.
you are. Yeah, go right ahead.
Thank you, T. And good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, the funny thing is, art is my first love. I actually went off to college to be a commercial artist.
Hmm.
And some of you may recall back in the day, in your younger days, maybe around junior high school, there were publications that would have these items for you to draw, like a donkey head or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
And I did that, and next thing you know, this guy from an art institute shows up at the house and is having conversation with my parents about enrolling me in an art institute. And so that is my fallback. I've noticed when I need to get centered, I'm generally doing something that's art related. I was on a 2-hour phone call with the attorney office for an employee relations issue with one of my prior corporate jobs. And I had to fax over all the documents pertaining to the case. And about a week later, the attorney calls me and she says, "We got everything. Everything looks good. There was just one document we couldn't quite figure out and wondered if you could help us out." And I'm like, "Sure." So I grabbed my file and she says, "I'll fax it over to you." And she faxes me this document where I had written some notes, but then there was this really weird looking creature that I was doodling and drawing, and it looked like a Martian with several eyes. It was just something really weird, and the both of us just broke out in laughter. But my happy place is really going to be something art related, which is why I do the crafts, that the jewelry work that T is referring to.
Yeah, you guys, you need to check out his website. So Tim, if you want to chat over to everybody the link to where your jewelry is, I mean, it really is astounding stuff.
Sure, thank you.
So
Thank you, T.
when you're actually producing one, I mean, is that whole act of constructing that, because I bring that up because that might be Tim's parallel behavior with people who like to knit, or who, any kind of repetitive physical movement can also become quite the Zen sort of experience. So anybody else among us, knitters, crafters, artists that find those kinds of things very, yeah. All right, well, there you go. Yeah, Beads by Tim. Yeah, check it out. Okay, so who else wants to share what some of their personal PowerPoint maneuvers might be? All right, I'll give you one of mine. Playing the harp for me can be either a very centering experience or a very off-centering experience. If I'm trying to learn a new piece of music out of the classical repertoire, I promise you that is not a Zen centering experience. Or if I'm just trying to play something correctly, I am out of my centered experience. But if I just set the harp into a key where I can just forget about the fact that I'm playing music and just allow my fingers to go wherever they go along the strings and do whatever they feel like doing on the strings, as I generate that sound, I get moved to a very centered spot. So I guess there's the difference we were talking about before about how vibration might actually be a centering sort of an experience for people. And obviously the harp rests on your collarbone, so you're feeling everything that the harp is doing. But I think sometimes if you just allow yourself to just play, not all instruments lend themselves to that. I imagine some instruments, unless you're quite skilled, you're going to end up making horrible noise rather than than music. But some instruments can be put into a mode where anybody can sit and play them and just have this transformative kind of Zen sort of an experience. I think that might be why drum circles ended up being a real popular thing for a while.
And T,
Yep. Yes, dear.
my centering place is gardening.
Yeah.
Going out and clipping my roses, or just, I mean, like doing things that nobody would even think of, like, oh, let me just take off this leaf that's dead, or making it all look pretty, or ruffling the dirt, or something like that. It's just a very centering experience.
Me too. Me too. And being with feeding birds and being with animals, you know, that's all centering.
Yes.
So like when you're out there in a garden, the sensory smell, all those kinds of sensory capacity is initiated, would you say?
Yeah, yes, and I don't know if you can hear the birds, but the birds are singing, and little breeze. It's, to me, that's pure joy, and I just take a deep breath. And if ever I'm not feeling, if I'm feeling sad or feeling whatever, I make myself get up and go outside and be with my flowers.
That's awesome.
Okay, so anyone else have any other PowerPoint maneuvers? So Linda, what's one of your internal PowerPoint? Linda's also a journaler. So, but Linda, what are some of your internal PowerPoint maneuvers? How do you center yourself without doing something?
That's very interesting. I don't know. I mean, sometimes it would be journaling, and that's actually the only one I can think of.
Yeah, see, that's because
Maybe
I
it's
also know that for
maybe it's
Linda,
because I do all the time.
yeah, because I mean, look, your Tai Chi was very centering, but
Oh,
that's,
yes.
that's external doing something, and you're always, while you can get lost in maybe the first, what was it, your 21 moves or whatever, because you've done them a million times.
Right.
But when you try to stay focused on doing it correctly, you know, all those little subtleties and nuances in the positions, is it as inexperienced then, or does that take you out of the Zen element and now it becomes more of a, you know, you're trying to perfect something?
Right. It's like you were saying on the harp. When I'm just plain doing a move to some beautiful music over and over again, and you get in this wonderful flow, that's meditation. And if you know the 21 moves like the back of your hand, that's a meditation. But if you're trying to do the 108,
Yeah. Yeah.
your mind is working.
Required.
Your mind is working. What's next? What's
Right.
next?
But doesn't that really have to do with cognitive and intentional interruption? I mean, if I play the piano by ear, it's like what you're saying, T, that it just flows through you. But when you put thought to it, there's cognitive interruption to that experience and the sensory experience. And I think that's a lot of, you know, Linda can go to her garden and she doesn't have to put a lot of cognitive thought. God, after all these years, Linda, if you have to, that's a problem.
Yeah.
So don't you, yeah, I think it's the interruption of the cerebral cortex, actually.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think anytime you're going into thought in that way, in a cognitive way, you're moving out of it. It's when you're losing the thought process and just allowing yourself to flow. That's
Right.
in whatever it doesn't matter what it is. It's just whatever.
Because we're in an altered state when we don't have that interruption. Yeah.
Yeah,
that's right.
And I can tell you, Linda can find the garden to be a very Zen sort of an experience, but just wait till she sees a single aphid on one of her rosebuds. It's no longer a Zen experience. Now she becomes a garden commando. It's true, right, dear?
That's true.
Yeah. Kill it now.
So T, when you're teaching these PowerPoints in organizations, did you find that there was an imbalance between the internal and external, or was there one that was greater than the other, or they just didn't realize it?
Yeah, I think that people seem to think that it's always going to be something internal going on. And so, because things like meditation, things like breathing, mindfulness, all those good sorts of practices are things that are marketed as
Hmm.
these things that can help you to find more peace, more whatever. And so, if you're someone who has finds yourself in these out of balance kind of situations, well, then you would be very much attracted to that kind of appeal. Where when you look at anything that's external, it could be a Zen experience for you, but it could also be quite the opposite. So, like
Hmm.
Brian, for you in bike riding, if you just let yourself go out for a ride, well, great. It could be very much a Zen sort of an experience. But if you decide to enter some sort of a bicycle race,
Mm.
well, I would imagine that the Zen person will finish the course sooner or later, but
Yeah, yeah.
unless, to Kathy's point, that feeling of speed is what really transforms you. Like, forget the bike for just a second. I've always wondered how anybody can run for 26 point whatever miles in a marathon. And someone said at a certain point in the run, your mind goes to a very different place where you're
Hmm.
not experiencing discomfort, where you're not consciously focusing on how much further to go, et cetera, that they find. And maybe it's just because you reach a point where the endorphins start getting released.
Hmm.
And the
Hmm.
endorphins, I don't know that we could say an endorphin release is a PowerPoint maneuver, because I think an endorphin release is actually a self-protective kind of
Yeah,
event happening in your body.
yeah, it's more self-protective, but so they kind of train yourself for that, right? And
Yeah.
that's why people go on a search for it all the time, and through various activities, they want to experience that, and in a way that is sustainable, and it isn't. It isn't designed for that.
Yeah. Yeah. Or an Aboriginal walkabout. Is that what they call it in Australia, where you just decide
Hmm.
to go walk? And on the plane, I was watching a movie. I forget the name of it now, but it has Mark Wahlberg in it, and he's playing the role of a guy. I think his first name was Ben or whatever, but he finds out after his 13-year-old son commits suicide, um, that he was gay, and he starts off on a walk across America, and it's a real story, or at least based on
Hmm.
a real story, but I forget what it is. And he makes it as far as Colorado before a truck driver falls asleep at the wheel and kills him while he's walking along the road. But you just start thinking about, if you're going to be walking across the country, you have to believe that it's going to move your mind to a different place. In his particular case, um, they in the movie they believe that he has nonstop conversations with his deceased son. And
Hmm.
yeah, so it's a very interesting movie to be watching on an airplane. Yeah, it was interesting. We also watched on the plane. We watched Coda. If you've not seen Coda, Coda is an excellent movie. Um, and so I watched Coda, and what was the other one that I watched? Oh, I had never seen Dear Evan Hansen, and I guess that was a very successful play on Broadway, and now it's traveling all around the country, and they've made a movie of it. So Dear Evan Hansen. So we watched that. So you could have watched comedies and uplifting movies, and they could have let us know that masks were no longer required. But no, we're sitting there watching these tearjerkers. Anyway, okay. Anyone else want to share whatever your maneuvers are? Okay, well, if you do, just unmute and do that. But I'd like to kind of finish up this topic by saying, how do we turn this into something that's useful for us to do with clients? And when and how do you actually introduce the concept of people having internal and external PowerPoint maneuvers, and having PowerPoint maneuvers that are incidental, or I'm going to say incidental versus intentional. Do you guys, any of you do this kind of work with your clients? You might call it something else, but is this something that you're actively doing? So let's see, Kathy, how about you?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think the easiest way to do it is just if you're with somebody and describing the need to unwind or remove themselves from their current situation, or whatever it is, de-stress, whatever is going on, is just to talk with them, ask them questions. You know, what is it? Where do you find yourself most at peace? Where do you find the most joy, you know, in distance? And I was, for some, and just allow them to be thinking about what they do that allows them to kind of detach from their world and rest in some fashion, mentally rest or emotionally rest or whatever. And people, you know, I mean, my clients are very readily are able to describe things. So it's not that I'm always teaching them how to breathe. It's more of what do they do naturally that their body tells them to do or that they've learned. And if they want a technique, I can give them a breathing technique, but it's not always that. It's really just finding out from them. You know, it's very organic, because I'm a real believer that your, you know, as Brian was saying, your body tells you, you know, what you need. And so if you can help people just tune in to what they naturally do, if they're able to do that, that's where I'd go first.
Excellent.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's probably the tool that most people need most. When I keep reading these statistics about stress, it just seems like a lot of people are unaware of what's going on with their body. And like there's a lot of disembodiment in the workplace in general. Like people are just sitting and, you know, trying to, you know, pan out work for 12 hours straight with no rest. Your ultradian rhythms are going to just be burnt out. It's just, that's not how we're designed to function with, you know, you need some kind of soft reset, as it would call in your, you know, something happens to your mobile phone and you call your provider and they say, yeah, let's start with a soft reset, turn your phone off, wait 15 seconds, turn it back on. And all of a sudden it's working okay. Well, human systems need soft resets throughout the day as well. And that's these PowerPoints. And I don't see it happening a lot for a lot of people, at least that's, you know, came through these studies. In fact, I was reading a study about it said we tend to undervalue subtractive changes. So under the auspices of productivity, it's about doing more. And that's what most people do. So even if they have an extra 15 minutes, you know, you find people are trying to fill that with something to get more done in the day instead of utilizing that 15 minutes for a soft reset or, you know, to do something disconnected. Like Einstein would take he called it a thought walk. And he's not trying to think, he's just trying to detach from whatever he was working on.
And so how do you think, Brian, you would integrate it as a physician? Where do you think it becomes useful for people to understand what their PowerPoint maneuvers are and pull them into play when needed?
I like what Kathy was describing. I think some kind of assessment, because what I'm discovering is I'm asking these questions and it just seems like people are unaware, like they're surprised. So I think maybe some kind of assessment to figure out, you know, as physicians, try to figure out like, what's your baseline? What's your current baseline? What are we currently working with? And then we can put these raw materials together to come up with some kind of, you know, treatment plan. So maybe some kind of assessment of some sort that's quick. You know, not something like they have to take online or something, but, you know, just a quick way of like what Kathy was talking about, you know, using some kind of inquiry, some kind of questions. What do you normally do? Sometimes people say, I don't do anything. That's the question I've been asking because I use a lot of sports medicine research. And so I'm asking sports medicine, they call it a recovery strategy. And so I say, well, what's your recovery strategy for coming down from stress? And it was like, what the hell is that?
Right.
So they have no idea. So I say, well, how do you calm down from stress? And that's when people say things like, well, you know, when I go home, I have to indulge in my guilty pleasures, reality TV shows or something like that. But it's not true an investment, you know, it's something distracting, but it's not an investment.
Right. That's an important point. Go right ahead, Brian. Or let's see, Tim.
Yeah, I like what Kathy and Brian referencing. And as I listen to them, I'm thinking about folks that I coach that are in career transition, and particularly when they have been downsized by their company and their stress level is really high. And, you know, they're going through a lot between that period and when they find their next opportunity. But this idea of the soft reset, whether or not they understand that or not, I think that it is definitely applicable. And it's something that you know, I'll certainly begin to label as such, even though we talk through that and try and give folks maneuvers to make that happen and to make that transition. But I think that that's extremely applicable.
Interesting. Well, one thing I'll share is that I described for you guys early on about how do you deal with an exceptionally high energy child. And what I'm observing is that everyone is trying to lower the child's level of energy instead of teaching the child how to center himself. Remember we talked about a while ago that it is true that if someone is very far upgrid and you do downgrade maneuvers, sooner or later they will reach or pass through the power point. But that doesn't mean they've been centered. They're just, you know, they're just traveling through on their way to somewhere else. So yeah, any of the sets of maneuvers that you would apply up, out, down, and in would sooner or later reach the power point. But you can't just keep doing things that are going to lower a kid's tension and think that fixes the problem, because what's going to happen a few minutes later is that something's going to move the kid upgrid. But if we can teach a child who's feeling out of sorts how to center themselves, then I think from that point, depending on the age and level of development of the child, they might be able to recognize when being more energetic is useful to them and when being energetic is draining to them and certainly disruptive to anyone and everyone around them. And I would hate to think that because we haven't worked with a child to learn how to center themselves, that we rely upon pharmaceuticals to center the child, because that's a problem. We want, when we talk about, even for all of us, we don't go to the PowerPoint or to the center of the change grid in order to stay there for hours. You know, I mean, even if we're practicing our meditation or whatever, usually we've set aside 15 minutes, a half an hour maybe, but we know there's a lot more life to do out there. If we take a pharmaceutical, that's going to endure for a lot longer than any of us really need in order to recenter or recharge our batteries. And so I think it's getting increasingly easy to hand someone a pill that they may very well need. Make no mistake about it. I'm not saying the pharmaceuticals don't have their benefit, but there's a big difference between pharmaceuticals that are vitamins, if you will, versus pharmaceuticals that are designed to make somebody less annoying or whatever. So thoughts about that?
Well, T, I'm curious. I had some thoughts about how would you help a child center?
Well,
you know, what would you do? I mean, give it a structure to that energy, a game or a structure like a jumping jack or a structured process where they can get rid of that energy and dissipate it.
Yeah, there are certainly, I think there's certainly lots of beneficial activities that you could get the child engaged in to help release that energy in the moment. But I think that what I would tend to do is to go into my path of self-discovery mode. I would ask the child questions. So I would say to them, what's all this energy about? How does that feel to you? And you know, what would you like to do with all of that energy? Where did that all, you know, so you just ask the kid questions. And I think it goes back to the brain, obviously. If that kid doesn't know how to move into his cortex, but instead stays, I mean, Brian, tell me, where is someone who's just got this constant random, some might label it as even some ADD stuff, but I've often thought that ADD stands for adult discipline disorder more than attention deficit disorder, although I know that's a real thing. How do you, try something else other than that? Yeah. Thoughts about that? What's going on in the brain?
I gotta talk. My TED Talk is on brain fitness for kids.
Yeah, do
Cloning
tell.
the DNA of Einstein. And I have, Kathy, you really should watch it. And I have had children change listening to one 5-minute track one time, but it's visualization, mental imagery, where I do put them in an alpha state and then program them to be more like Gustav the goat, more courageous, or like Ollie the owl, and get unbelievable results. And the mother said, we only played one track one time. So kids are already automatically in a slower brainwave alpha state. So let's capitalize on it, which is what I do.
Yeah,
So
That's pretty cool. Can you chat that over?
I will. So I have a complete program. It's a complete system of thinking. It's a book to anchor them.
Oh,
and then
cool.
the blanket is NLP that suggests that they're planting seeds of greatness, guidelines for parents. But the audio is where the magic is. Yeah.
I'd love to hear that.
I'll get that to you.
See,
Brian gave me your email. I'll send it to you.
Yeah, I kind of think that that when it comes to kids behaving in the way that we're talking about, I wonder if it's because they don't have any other options available to them, or they aren't aware of other ways that they can think and behave.
Exactly.
So we have to find ways to help them have those options. And the thing that I do know is that if I tell the child what the options are, I'm likely to encounter pushback. But if I ask the child a question and the child comes up with the exact same answer, it's going to stick. You guys have heard me say before that if I tell you something, it's propaganda, but if I can pull the same words out of your mouth, it's gospel.
Right.
So let's lead the child on their own path of self-discovery.
And that's spot on, because really those parts of the brain that mitigate for reasoning doesn't fully develop in children until you're like 25 for some. So really when teenagers tell you, you ask, why did you do what you just did? And they say, I don't know. They're telling you the truth. They don't know.
Exactly. It wasn't where the behavior came from.
But, and I think it's a combination. Kathy, I think you were asking T if it's structure. I just remember when my kids were little, and I did primarily work with children as a psychotherapist. But for example, I gave them a choice of what clothes they wanted to wear, but I would structure it so they wouldn't get teased at school. Yeah. So I think everything with kids is giving them that sense of self and independence, but within a structure where we're protecting them.
That makes perfect sense. You know, thinking about also, adolescence and adolescent energy and what to do with that. And it's, it's choice within structure.
Exactly.
Well, it is top of the hour. I need to get on to my other call, but how do you guys feel about having parenting on the change grid or attention management in child rearing as a topic we spend some time chatting about? Because Edie, I would love to hear more about the techniques that you've come up with and the approaches that you've used.
Yeah, it's my passion. I would love it.
Okay, good. All right. Good.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah.
Something better than Velcroing them to the wall would be a benefit for me.
See, duct tape just works better. That's what I found. Duct tape. Okay, anywho, there you go. All right, thanks everybody. We'll talk to you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.